joined SaaStock a little while ago and are part of their founder circles. It's been absolutely brilliant for us. We first came into it to further our community, our reach, our network, and to learn from some of the world-class speakers that SaaStock has come and speak. And I have to say, it has been absolutely superb for us.
Welcome to the SaaS Revolution Show. Barbra Gago, who is the CEO and founder of Pando. Welcome, Barbra.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, great to have you on the podcast. Whereabouts are you calling in from?
Amsterdam. I've been here
Amsterdam.
for, about 2.5 years.
And were you in, or are you in Amsterdam because you were CMO at Miro previously?
It was one of the stepstones that brought my husband and I here. He's European already, so he had been in the US for like 15 years, and we wanted a little bit of a break. So it was an easy transition to make right before the pandemic, but it's been good.
Lovely city. Actually, I can imagine, well, I don't know if it's okay to say this, but I'll say it anyway. But Amsterdam may have been even nicer during the pandemic because it would be a lot quieter.
Yeah.
It can be very busy, as you know, at certain times. So just imagine the beautiful architecture in the streets and just peace. It would have been quite nice.
It's been nice. I mean, it's starting to get a bit more touristic-y, but yeah, over the last several months, we've had really nice weather, and it's just a magical place. So we're happy.
It's been a while. I'll hopefully come back. We're actually planning to do a SaaStock local Amsterdam event. So it's kind of like a large sort of meetup. Actually, it may be in Miro's offices.
Cool.
It may not be, but hopefully we'll be doing something soon.
Awesome.
But anyway, Barbra, tell us a little bit about yourself as a person, and let's start with that.
So I am from California. I was born and raised there. I spent most of my life there, first in Southern California, and then I moved up to the Bay Area when I was 17 to go to school. Interestingly, I studied fashion and was in the fashion industry for a few years before, and living in New York before coming back to San Francisco, and then getting into tech by way of having one of the first kind of women's blogs. At the time, there was a lot of tech-focused blogs like Engadget, and I created one with a partner that was called Skimplistic, and this kind of launched me into my career in tech. I think I've always been sort of entrepreneurial. Like in high school, I didn't have a regular job. I would make jewelry and go sell it at boutiques at the beach. I would go to music events and see that you could have a booth, and then I would set up a booth. Even when I was a kid, I wanted money to go buy candy or do something, I would whip up some homemade bookmarks and go door to door and sell them. So I've always been spending my time doing kind of early stage and entrepreneurial things. Most of my career I've spent in Silicon Valley, just moving to Europe over the last couple of years, and really focused on kind of disruptive tech and early tech that we first had to sell to early adopters. And, that's common for disruptive tech, but first in sort of sales and marketing automation, and then enterprise social networking, and then people tech tools, and then enterprise collaboration. And now I'm back to people tech.
Cool. Very cool. Thanks for sharing that. And so you are, the founder and CEO of Pando. Tell us a little bit about that. So what, the founding story would be great. And also, what does Pando do? Why have you built this company?
Yes. So Pando is an employee progression platform. Our goal basically is to kill performance reviews altogether, and the vision is to sort of get companies to a just-in-time promotion model. We've gone agile pretty much everywhere else in the organization, except for when it comes to people, and performance management is notoriously painful and really ineffective and filled with a lot of emotions and fear and all kinds of things. We do that by helping companies anchor performance ratings, feedback, goals, achievements with individuals, like with a person's individual level as well as set up competencies based on their role. So everything is like hyper contextualized, but it's also a way to make what used to be pretty quantitative a bit more qualitative. Sorry, something that used to be qualitative, more quantitative. When I was at Miro, actually, I built out leveling and career frameworks with competencies for the team there that I overtook when I joined. Many of them had been at the company for a while. They didn't really know what their career path was. And I had done this before at previous roles. So I did that there, and that quickly snowballed into a lot of people either wanting to join marketing because there was these career frameworks and levels and competencies, or other team, like people from different teams that were just kind of demanding that they had it in their function. So I ended up leading this whole process. And at the end of the day, we did like what most companies end up doing, which is building these great frameworks, having competencies, having levels, giving a little bit more transparency to employees, but ultimately them feeling like, okay, well, this is great, but now what? So it wasn't actionable, and there wasn't a way to really use it. And it was pretty disconnected from any performance or anything like that. And so when I left Miro, I wanted to solve this problem, and ultimately that's what we're doing now.
Very cool. I'm sure many listening, and certainly myself, I feel when you talk about performance reviews, kind of almost flinch a little bit, just in terms of the experiences that I've had in the past, right? And yeah, so definitely welcome a change, around that, and so great stuff to kind of see that
There's a big
that it's coming.
There's just like a big demand, I think, too, with like great resignation and this whole like reshuffling and people working everywhere and more remote work. Like the old way of doing this, it was already not great, but now with everybody totally distributed, managers aren't really managing people by being with them anymore. Everybody is kind of distributed, and there, with lack of structure and transparency around where am I at in my career at this company, what is my next step, how do I actually get there, it really is amplified in that context where employees just don't feel like they have a path, and they're likely going to go somewhere that they feel that they'll get that.
Yeah, no, definitely we're seeing that a lot. And so what data can you share behind the company? Obviously, it's recently formed. Can you like a founding date, VC backed or bootstrapped?
Yeah,
How many people? Any metrics you can share of where
sure.
you're at the moment?
So we actually just announced about 7 million in funding. I founded the company at the end of 2020 in September. We raised a small pre-seed at that time, and then last year in December we raised 5 million from Craft Ventures. We also had Lyra Hippo leading in that round, and then we're working with Global Founder Capital from Europe. So we have a nice balance of west east coast of the US and then also in Europe, which kind of represents sort of how the team is spread out as well. We are just we've been very focused on launching the product. We launched it mid-year last year, and we've been building crazily since then. We have about 20 employees at the company, so we scaled very quickly after raising our seed round in December. We have about 15 customers, so we're just kind of ramping up on that end. We just announced funding and kind of, I would say, went public, let's say, with Pando. And so we've already had a number of customers renewing at least, and in most cases they're expanding over 50%, which is really exciting.
Very cool.
Yeah,
good stuff. And I did see the announcement, I think it was yesterday or the day before.
Yeah.
Great to see that. So congrats. So the company is, as you say, founded in 2020, so less than 24 months old. I think you shared a couple of things that you've been doing there, but so what over the last 24 months, from what you've been doing, what has worked well that you can share, that people can kind of learn from a business, kind of at your stage? What hasn't worked necessarily so well and you wouldn't repeat, but also people could learn from?
I think for us, the biggest kind of first of all, what we've been really focused on is finding customers and getting customers who are aligned with this vision. What we're trying to do is sort of shift the mindset of how companies approach this problem. So it's not like an easy thing to do. It's going to take time and it's going to take years, but ultimately there are companies who are ready to embrace it. So I think we're being extremely focused on who we target and how we target them. I think that's like one of the big takeaways in terms of early customer development. We have to identify companies that not only have, from an ICP perspective, not only have the company size and the structure and location and, what type of business they are at, et cetera, but also sort of the mindset or values. And it's not the easiest thing to sort of uncover. So I think a lot of that has come out of leveraging the network that I've built over my career in people tech and in tech in general, a lot of community-based kind of sells through referrals and people having shared values. We have built, we're very early to have a target account list, but we have built a target account list. We have 300 companies that we sort of identified and scrutinized at that level to make sure that we're at least proactively targeting the right kind of companies. And then essentially, playing it by ear with companies who are coming inbound. I think the biggest challenge, I don't know that it hasn't worked, but because Pando has an opinion, not all software has an opinion, but ours does. It means that companies really have to have the right profile and really have to be aligned with what we're trying to do, because otherwise they'll just be like, they don't want to do it. I think there's a big appetite for companies, for products to have an opinion though in this space, because a lot of companies just need help and they don't know what to do and they don't know how to do it, and managers also need a lot of help. But that's one thing that's definitely something we have to navigate in terms of how we position and how we continue to develop the market. We're pushing that fundamental shift, so it's going to be a lot of finding the right companies initially and then getting the rest of the industry to realize that, that's the right way to do it.
Awesome. And you've been a CMO and a sort of senior or very sort of high level in marketing for a large part of your career. How has the transition been to becoming then a founder and CEO? I guess it would be sort of interesting, assuming that there are, let's say, some CMOs or other kind of C-suite VP levels that potentially thinking about becoming founders or will become founders in the future. Any learnings that you can share around that you've had?
I mean, honestly, I feel like being a CMO is a great training ground for becoming a founder and also being a CEO, because at least in the roles that I've had in B2B tech, you're operating and sort of needing to be strategic across so many different dimensions, if that's pricing or the product or feedback from customers that then gets to the product, customer acquisition, brand positioning, etc. So I think if you're extremely customer focused, which I have been, you spend a lot of time with customers, it really helps you sort of develop a product mindset, because you're really just constantly listening for those things that they're saying that they struggle with, that they have problems in their day-to-day. If you're really listening to that, I think it really gives you that product mindset. So even coming out of marketing and not really being a product leader, I feel like I'm very well equipped to have the vision that helps my customers solve the problems that they have. So I think CMO is a really hard job. There's a lot that you're responsible for. There's a lot of moving parts. It's also very high stakes. So I feel like it's a reasonably good segue into this particular role.
Definitely.
I've been very early stage operator throughout my career. When I joined Greenhouse, we had 13 employees. I was, I think, the 7th at Culture Amp. So I've always been doing very early stage operating. So I'm used to rolling up my sleeves and sort of building. The most exciting part about being the CEO now is just building the team that then builds all the infrastructure for all the pieces. So it's great.
Good. I read occasionally or see occasionally that it's an advantage if a company has a CEO that understands marketing. And I think in your case, you definitely would have that, right?
Yeah, and I've been very lucky that all of the CEOs, well, not all of them, but the ones that I've done the best work for have understood marketing. I think Miro is a great example. When I joined Miro, it was called Real Time Board, and I almost didn't join because that's what it was called. And I was like, I don't think this can be big with that name. Like, Real Time Board, it's so literal. And I was like, okay, well, do I think these guys are going to let me change the name? Like, do they believe in that? And ultimately, I decided, yes, they do. And they did. And I got to lead that initiative to like rename the company, rebrand it. And it was hugely rewarding for me, but also for the community. And it really like took off after that. So I think, yeah, founders, CEOs that even if they don't know what they're doing with marketing, but they appreciate it and understand that's like a really big lever for building long lasting and defensible brands and businesses. It's the best.
Yeah, no, definitely amazing. And I didn't know that about Miro, what it used to be called. And I
Yeah,
think the brand is super strong right now, and they're a real rocket ship, right? So
indeed.
yeah, no, great stuff. And so we mentioned that literally, like yesterday, you've announced and gone public with the seed round with Craft Ventures that I think you closed in December. I think you mentioned,
Yeah.
and to tell us why. I know they weren't the only investors, and you actually mentioned you've got West Coast, East Coast, and in Europe. I guess why Craft, and what was the story there, and then maybe even with these additional investors to complete the round. Tell us a little bit about the story of how that came to be and why these particular investors.
So Lyra Hippo and Global Founder Capital so Lyra Hippo led our pre-seed. So we raised like 1.6 the December before, and Global Founder Capital was a co-lead in that. And I think with Lyra Hippo, we really connected on the vision. They have a big thesis sort of around millennials and how this is evolving, well, and also Gen Z and how this is evolving, how people and employees interact across all the dimensions. And so they really understood the value of what we were doing. We really wanted a partner in Europe, and I really like the team that we're working with in terms of Global Founder Capital. With Craft, it was actually kind of, I don't know, maybe it was kismet because I had a short list. The first time I raised funding, I had a lot of contacts, but I also hadn't done it before. So I had like a very big funnel, and I was spending time with people that didn't make sense to spend time with because maybe they invest at later stages, but I was just kind of learning and figuring it out. So when we did the seed round, I was like, okay, these are the VCs that I want to talk to. Craft, I pretty much just wanted to work with because I have other founder colleagues that work with them that really like them. They have a lot of expertise in B2B tech. So I think from a just network and community and expertise perspective, they really understand the type of business that we're trying to build. And of course, there were great feedback from other founders. Lyra Hippo, Caitlin, who's our lead there, she actually introduced me to Lainey, who led the investment for Craft. And I just happened to be in New York for like 2 days, right as I was starting the fundraising. And we met for coffee, and like very quickly that it happened. So there wasn't a lot of like, ooh, let's try to pit everybody against each other. I was really happy with the terms and the team, and I wanted to work with Craft, so it was just an easy decision and a very short process. So I'm very lucky for that.
Very cool. Well, looking forward to see how you develop the company, obviously with the VCs behind you and the capital, and in terms of obviously what the product does, right? But you mentioned it's come about from these frameworks and processes that you had and you were implementing at Miro, and I think previously. So for those that say they're not using, and assuming like majority of listeners are not yet using Pando, But in terms of the frameworks that you have, what can people, or what can you share that listeners can be doing to improve and drive employee growth?
I mean, I think the main thing that companies sort of fall short on right now is making it clear to every employee that there is a path and this is what it looks like, and that's clear and structured, and they know that they have an opportunity to get to the next level. I think most companies keep employees in the dark about that. Maybe they have a leveling framework and everybody's in a level, but employees don't know their level, and they're not really using it in a strategic way to like create mobility and progression and excitement about your path. I think that's a big shift that's happening with this whole great resignation. There's been, like, we advise it, McKinsey did research and also advised to add more levels and leverage that as a way to really keep employees engaged and growing. I think mostly it's making sure they understand they have a path and then showing them, and also like being accountable to actually progressing them. So we use and help companies essentially build leveling frameworks. We encourage companies to use more levels because that creates that progression mobility. We also help companies sort of then, if you create more levels, you can narrow comp bands, which is more equitable, but it also makes decisions around comp and progression easier because it's like more narrow, it's more transactional. When you get to this level, this is what happens. And then really like thinking about roles and what are the competencies that people need to be performing well in those roles to have the impact that they need to have at the company, and also develop in their career so that they can grow. I think in Europe, one of the bigger things that we're seeing with customers that we're working with is that it happens in the US too, but I think it's more common that companies have already made the shift, but you have like these IC path that ends, at this level, and then over here is the manager level. And so the other big thing is to really create a true parallel path for individual contributors as well as managers, so that you're not forcing people to become managers if they don't want to be managers or if they're not good at the manager skill, and really convey that an individual contributor path is very important, and you can continue to build your skill set and your career at the company. It's not better or worse than being a manager, it's just different. And so this is something I'm seeing companies start to adopt in Europe, but it's definitely a little bit behind from what I've seen in the US, but a lot of companies in the US also haven't adopted it, because I think ultimately having pay parity between, a level 5 IC and a level 5 manager is when you really have that like true parallel path.
Around, sharing the, being more transparent or open with colleagues about that there is a path.
Yeah.
So they can share a quick anecdote that I think, a lot of people would probably experience, right? But we had a top performer that we were thinking about, for a leadership role. And we were thinking about her in that role, in the very near future. And then one day she caught us by surprise by, resigning. And she'd, taken a role or accepted a role at another company.
Yeah.
And then we had a conversation, and she said, well, I didn't see that there was a path that that I could go on to, into a leadership position.
Yeah.
I didn't see that was available. And we were like, well, we were thinking about it. And so, well, okay, you can't read our minds.
Yeah.
Actually, and then luckily it turned out well, because we managed to, convince her to stay, because actually what she did really want was that leadership role.
Yeah.
She just didn't know that it was there. And we hadn't, we hadn't given them that, shared that the path was there and how you get there. And so it was a good lesson for us.
Yeah.
On that one.
It's an easy thing to fix. I think the fear is that, like, if you share that, employees will think, oh, it's a checklist and I just have to tick off these boxes and then I get my promotion. But I think that's where there's kind of the cultural shift around, well, there is a feedback loop between the manager and the employee, and it should be transparent and it should be clear what's expected. And the goal of the manager is to develop that employee and to make them successful and to get them to progress. Like, you want employees to progress and develop in your org. You don't want to like keep them in their same level or like manage them out. I mean, the idea is, how do we hire the best people? How do we develop them? How do we keep them growing? Because the more they grow, the better the business is going to do.
No, definitely. And so earlier you shared, I mean, some of the things that you're doing in order to kind of, you know, grow the business. You talk about, you know, the target account lists and, you know, looking for these customers that also, you know, they're not only going to use the product, but kind of have that kind of same sort of mindset. But like, if we look at the next sort of 12 months, and now with the, I don't know if it's still 7 million in the bank, but in terms of what you're doing to get to where you need to be in 12 months time, I don't know what that looks like. And I don't know what you can share, like where you want to be in 12 months time. But what are maybe one of the two big things that you're doing to really kind of grow Pando to be where it needs to be, you know, in 12 months time?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think first we've hired across the function. So we're really set up as a team already. We have head of marketing, head of sales, head of customer success, head of design, head of product, head of engineering. We also have like a people ops lead. So we're really set up from a leadership perspective. We have more hiring to do in each of those teams, but we've also set up kind of technical infrastructure. So in terms of getting HubSpot up and running, preparing customer success to be able to scale to a lot of customers onboarding at the same time, having engineering processes and all of that set up. So that's where we've spent a lot of time really beefing up the foundation, I would say, before we go into this kind of scale mode. Obviously, we're still very early stage, but within the next 12 months, we want to be around 1 million in ARR. So we're planning to grow as quickly as we can. I think from a marketing and sales perspective, as I mentioned, that sort of go-to-market strategy with target accounts is going to be consistent. I think we'll do a lot of community-based marketing initiatives. Events, I believe, will be a big channel for us because people like want to get back together and see each other. And those are very specific communities that we can tap into. And then I think like thought leadership and content obviously is going to be huge, not just from a long tail sort of organic perspective, but also really helping companies understand sort of the trends and where all of this stuff is going and what they need to do in order to be set up to make sure they keep the talent that they have and keep developing it. I think for us also with these career frameworks and competencies, we have a big opportunity which we'll experiment with, which is self-serve and having templates and frameworks that you can, you know, onboard as a head of design or head of engineering and sort of experiment with land and expand from that perspective. Most of the sales today are really HR top down kind of full company rollout. And I think there's an opportunity to do kind of, well, what we did at Miro, which was bottoms up and top down. I think it doesn't work for every type of business, but this is one that I think, this is a model I think could work with Pando because you really want that adoption and that advocacy within the organization, and you can get that through managers and their teams using the system.
Very cool. Well, I'm sure you'll do it, and looking forward to sort of track that. So 1 million ARR in 12 months. We'll hold you accountable,
Okay.
and we'll come back for that. Moving from Pando to you, what are some of the biggest lessons that you've learned over your career to date? Maybe one or two that you could share.
I mean, people obviously are the most important. I guess there's no surprise there. I'm building a product in the people space. But I also think like having a really strong network and nurturing people for a very long time. So I think hiring is one of my superpowers. I have an amazing team. They're all really, really good. But I also nurtured people. My head of marketing, for example, I brought on in January, but I started talking to her a year before. I knew I didn't need a head of marketing until I raised my seed round. but I wanted her to be my head of marketing, and she had another job, and I just like nurtured her for an entire year so that when I was ready, she was also ready, and she took the job and started. So I think like really building and fostering a strong network of talent around you that's in all different spaces, design, engineering, sales, marketing, I think is really, really important. And you know, being an authentic leader, not sweating the small stuff. Like nothing that we're really doing is life and death. And if something happens or somebody makes a mistake, it's like, yeah, help them grow from it and move on.
What is the biggest challenge so far in being a CEO?
Well, I mean, I think it's just being alone or feeling alone, at least. Like I don't have any co-founders either, so I am kind of solo. I've built an amazing team around me, so I'm not really solo, but you have that feeling. I think the other big piece is just recognizing like the power that you have as a CEO or how that's perceived with employees. I remember throughout my career as a CMO having people on my team go talk to the CEO and then coming out and being like, okay, I have to do all this. And it's like, well, just because you had that meeting and they had some ideas doesn't mean you actually have to like run with it. So I think really keeping myself in check with that and realizing, you know, that stuff I say and the way that I behave is really perceived in a very different light now as like the head of the company. This is, yeah, this is a fun thing, but also something that I think everybody should be mindful of in terms of how you're interacting with people on the team.
No, definitely. And what do you do to improve yourself as a CEO and as leader of the business?
Well, I mean, feedback, asking people for feedback just because you're the CEO doesn't mean you shouldn't get it or ask for it from anybody at the company. So I definitely encourage that. I have an executive coach. I've also built like a small community of other CEOs and founders that I meet with pretty regularly or that I can call when I have just something that I need to vent about or discuss or just talk through. And that's been really helpful to have, you know, other perspectives that are not like close to the issue to help sort of guide through that. I think continued education and as in many ways as you can get it is helpful. So I try to do it in a lot of different ways.
Awesome. No, 100% agree with that. And what about in terms of staying healthy and sane? Like, what do you what do you do around that?
I mean, honestly, I'm so happy. Like, I love my job. I feel the least stressed I've been. And I think that's because I like really feel like I'm on my path. Obviously, I work way more than I ever worked. I mean, I've always worked a lot, but this is like next level. I will say being in Amsterdam with most of my team on the West Coast is kind of helpful because I really do get sleep, which is weird because I don't really start meetings until maybe 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So I kind of work a night shift, but I actually do get a lot of sleep, which is really, really fortunate. I travel and I play tennis, so I think it's just, you know, balancing all the things. Sleeping is probably the best.
How many hours sleep do you get? And as a venture backed company, just curious because as you said, you worked a lot. How many hours a week do you work?
Oh, I mean, I can work, you know, 10 to 14 hours in a day, but I also can sleep like 8 to 9 hours. So I feel like it's reasonably balanced.
Yeah, very good. My body won't allow me to sleep more than 8 hours. There's just something biological, very difficult to do. But
Well,
yeah,
eight
I mean,
is
getting
good
eight,
though.
sleeps
Eight's perfect.
eight is good. Eight is
Yeah.
good. I do try to go to bed these days 9:30 sort of PM, and then wake. I'm an early riser, so like 5:30, and I've
Wow.
got my 8 hours. So I've got to get shit done before the kids wake up. or I think I have to get shit done before the kids wake up. So that's kind of my reason. If I didn't have kids, I'd probably go to bed later. But I do.
Yeah, we don't go to bed till like, I think last night it was like 2 a.m. So
oh wow,
it's
yeah.
it's
Amazing.
a different cycle.
And so you're speaking at SaaStock in Dublin this October. So very excited for that. Back in person events, back in person this year
excited.
After a couple of years of being remote. Any thoughts yet on what you'll be talking about? I know it's quite early.
I mean, it depends on what the audience wants. I think there's several things I'm interested to talk about and I think would be relevant to a lot of scaling companies. So attracting and retaining talent through career pathing, or optimizing what we call the employee lifetime value through structured career progression. So like, how are you, increasing the value of every employee that you hire? Or this concept of just-in-time promotions and really moving your people operations into the age of agile. So there's several options. Maybe we can get some feedback and see what people are excited about.
Yeah, please do give us feedback if you like any of those options. And my colleague David, I think reached out today, so we'll be speaking soon in terms of picking those topics. But excited to do that and see you in person, in October.
Yeah, I'm very excited.
Barbra, where can people find you online and Pando online if they're curious to look at the product?
I am mostly on LinkedIn, so that's the best place to find me. And then Pando, it's pretty straightforward, pando.com.
Awesome. Good stuff. Very easy and straightforward.
Yeah.
Nice one. Well, Barbra, thanks so much for being on the SaaS Revolution Show today and sharing with the SaaStock community. Really appreciate it. Great speaking to you and great learning from you.
It was wonderful. Thank you so much.